Welcome to another episode of Doubl3Tap. Excited to be exploring something a bit new. We're joined by Henri, co-founder of Privy. Privy being the blockchain onboarding solution. Henri, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very, very excited to be chatting.
So we got gonna dig in deep to what you guys are currently building, the evolution of Privy, and some of the exciting stuff to look forward to. But before that, Henri, what games are you currently playing?
A few, some in crypto, some outside. I'm playing a bit of Elden Ring. I go back to Factorio on lonely nights where I need to do something that is familiar. And in the crypto realm, been playing a lot of Pirate Nation, Block Lords. We've been very excited about Basement.Fun and Arcade, which is a collaboration between the folks at Stack and the folks at Atari, bringing back Atari historical games on base. And then, frankly, been playing a lot of the games that a developer called Small Brain puts out. So Mystery Meme, Words 3, a lot of these games that make use of the specificities of what it means to build on chain. And, I'm pretty drawn to the autonomous worlds movement. So that would be one. And then maybe finally, I think the treasure ecosystem on Arbitrum is really, really cool. So that's another part where I spend a bit of time.
I guess we'll just get straight into it. I think it would be beneficial for the listener to maybe go through a very brief evolution of the Privy onboarding stack, kind of like where it's been, where it's at now, and where you see it in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. So I think we started off really trying to figure out how do you build hybrid products that span the sort of on-chain and off-chain world together. I think our take was blockchains and sort of the shared state that they provide are an immensely powerful way of building products that have state carried across different apps, and that can yield very new experiences. Obviously, super useful for payments, but we thought super useful beyond that. However, there's an insane cost to decentralized consensus. And I was, I guess, consensus researcher before starting Privy, so I saw it close and front and center. And the thought was the only successful way to build mass consumer apps or mainstream apps will be to build hybrid apps that span sort of the on-chain and off-chain worlds properly, that have off-chain components where needed and on-chain components where required. So that's really how we started. How do we build better toolkits so developers can build these hybrid apps in an easier way? It started with this idea of progressive onboarding. Most apps today in crypto have you smash a connect button to get started. And basically the friction is huge. And I think our take was this is why DeFi has historically been the only part of crypto that has product market fit. It's because in exchange for the horrendous UX of having to connect the wallet up front before you've gotten any value from the product, you'd better hope that you're going to make money pretty quickly. And I think our thought was if we can improve the UX, if we can, for example, delay the friction so that a user can start benefiting from the product before having to connect a wallet, which is a pretty sensitive action, then potentially this can sort of open up the aperture for wider sets of products to find product market fit in the space. So we start off with progressive onboarding, specifically connect with email, and then connect your wallet later on when you actually need to make your first transaction. Very naturally, that led to the creation of what we call embedded wallets. So these are self-custodial client-side wallets that are gated by the means that users already know. So their email, their SMS, their socials. And from here, it's led to sort of a fuller development of a platform where we have these in-app wallets that can operate across apps. We have better funding mechanisms. And I think the long-term goal for us is to really create a way for developers to build really amazing experiences, but that keep their users in control. We see that as being the magic, which is how do we make interop and how do we make self-custody a regular part of products such as they are. And we're kind of letting developers and gaming developers in particular lead the way in terms of telling us what they need so they can build really good products for their users.
Awesome. That's great context. And I think it's a topic that we talk about quite a lot here, where it's like delaying the sort of blockchain frictions, or even like if you wanted to activate users potentially to benefit from additional revenue streams via like trading or increased LTV, etc. You want to do it like deeper down the player funnel or like further down the player journey. I am curious though, like, are you guys able to track much what that conversion rate tends to look like across different apps? And are there any, like, I don't know, standout trends that kind of catch your interest?
Yeah, so we serve a pretty wide segment of the space, from NFTs and marketplaces to social fi to gaming, as well as like payments and DeFi infrastructure. So in that sense, the rates kind of vary, I think, based on the vertical that you're in. One of the metrics that we spend a lot of time looking at is sort of the ratio of monthly actives to monthly transacting users, so MAU to MTU. And how, because ultimately a lot of these products monetize via transactions, and that's the on-chain component of their business, so to speak. And so I would say in terms of conversion, there's that, and then there's obviously tracking from the initial login to actions being taken on in-game state, be that in a database or on a chain. And that ends up being back to the MTU ratio. I would say by and large, a good rule of thumb would be if you get to 40% MTU to MAU ratio, you're doing outstandingly well in terms of conversion. If you were lower than 15%, you probably want to work on the activation and early onboarding experience that you've built. That's kind of what I'm seeing blended across different verticals. But again, this is where I think gaming is such an interesting ecosystem in so many ways. The gaming experience in Web3 to date has often been akin to if you downloaded, Candy Crush, and the first action you had to take in game was register and buy a pack before you ever got to play the game. And so this is kind of what's cool about working with a lot of gaming products and gaming orgs is a lot of them are like veterans from the gaming industry. We work with a lot of folks from Zynga, like Justin Waldron and Amit from Proof of Play, and they really know what it takes to build a really great game. And so they are at the forefront of sort of fighting this infrastructure to keep the things that make crypto special, but also bring them into premier experiences for gamers.
I think it's easy to blame the frictions for low conversion rates. But I'm curious from your perspective, do you think it's more of a design challenge, or like, is the technology at a point where these conversions can happen like fairly frictionlessly and it's now more of a design consideration? Or yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. And I think there's a healthy in between, right? And I would actually see how early do you bring in financialization? How early do you bring in tokenomics into a game as kind of a crutch that you have to use in order to correct for some of the bad friction or unfortunate mechanics that the I guess architecture forces upon you. I guess my take is most often the thing that's to blame is lack of a compelling game or game design. I suspect. I'm not a game designer myself, and I have like the utmost respect for people who can do it. But ultimately, there's a reason, as I understand it, that the gaming industry is shaped the way it is, where a few breakout hits basically account for the vast majority of revenues outside of some of the like indie pockets of the industry. So I think for the most part, a lot of it has been about game design, but also kind of understanding what it means to build on chain. When do you bring in the on chain components? At what point? How much engagement do you want from your users before you do it? So I'd say it's a bit of both. There's probably some that's like independent game design and some that's actually understanding how do we use this new tool set and this new language in the gaming industry. In terms of are we there yet? I think we're mighty close. I suspect we might still be 6 to 12 months away, maybe 18. But there's been a co-evolution of three things that I think are really exciting. One, and here obviously I'm talking my book, is embedded wallets and this idea that you can have self-custody be more deeply ingrained into the fabric of the app experience itself. Again, imagine playing StarCraft and whenever you make a move, you've got a pop-up that prevents you from actually taking the action and be unsufferable. Two is L2s coming and basically lowering transaction costs and fees across the board. And then three is account abstraction, at least in the EVM space, and Solana already has it, and so on. But I think these three things coming together basically really sets the ground, I think, for a new toolkit in which a lot of these games can be unleashed. But I think, I'm sorry, I'll stop in a second. if you look at the sort of stuff that's been built by the likes of Zero X Park and those types of things, you can see, I think, the makings of really great games that simply account for the robustness of the gaming. And I think, like, looking at early Atari history, like Pong was a great game for the technology that it had. And the challenges at the time were like how to fit appropriate memory in a place where memory was the main constraint, which is obviously very different than when you look at a game like Fortnite today. So I guess my take is understanding what is the right game for this stage of development of the technology is the thing that's hard.
All right, awesome. So switching gears here a little bit and kind of drilling a little bit more down the gaming rabbit hole. One thing that we were thrilled to hear when we chatted with you is kind of the launch of this new Privy Unity SDK, and would love to hear a little bit, from the top, how you guys are thinking about unlocking gaming with Privy, and what you think kind of this new kind of connection between the blockchain stack and Unity will enable to kind of minimize some of that friction to kind of up those conversion numbers that you were alluding to earlier.
Yeah, so this is something that we're building with a number of customers, but the folks who pushed us over the edge really are the folks over at Pirate Nation, for instance, who have long been asking for Unity SDK that we wanted to support. And I think generally it's what we've found a lot of. And the point is to really embed. So again, for us, the wallet SDK that we provide so people can transact within the game all occurs client side. I think that's a really important requirement to self-custody, making sure that the user is the one who really owns the keys, controls how they're used, and ultimately that as the game builder or game developer, you're not becoming a provider on their behalf where you're handling and custodying assets for them. And so that means that you need to build components and SDKs where the front end does a bit more work on a cryptographic level. So we're building out a Unity SDK. Pirate Nation has been pushing for this, and it's been really exciting to work alongside them and other great builders to make it work. And the point is to basically make it that much easier for somebody building in-game to be able to have actions occur within the context in which the game's happening itself. So we've talked to a lot of folks also building on Unreal Engine. I think we're seeing Unity as the right first platform in which to explore, what does this actually unlock for the game developer? And we already have a half dozen developers who are lined up to hopefully help us really, launch and improve this SDK. And then from there, we'll kind of see how much farther we can take it. I mean, if we take a step back, and I think the impact that technology such as the one we've built has had on the space, I think we've been pretty singularly focused on building out really great consumer-facing experiences in the space. And the place where probably we've had the most impact, initially at least, has been on mobile. I think historically, mobile's been pretty underserved by crypto. And I think, frankly, the cost of having to switch out from your main app into a separate app in order to do any transactions is super, super costly to developers. So I guess historically, I would argue Privy has done really two things. One is smoothing experiences and reducing friction for crypto natives. And you can think of, for example, a product like FriendTech as having a fairly native audience, but one that wants to use a product that is modern. This is a team that really understands the UX of consumer products and that we've learned a lot working with. And then obviously the second frontier is unlocking the much bigger TAM of folks who don't care about crypto, who aren't here for the crypto or here for the product itself. And so I think initially the Unity SDK will help for the former. Initially, a lot of these games tend to, put upfront the crypto components that they have and draw a crypto native crowd. And I think for many of them, the goal is to quickly expand beyond that and build a game that, is unidentifiable as a crypto product unless you dig in and you get to those parts of the game. And so my guess is initially it'll probably have the most impact first on sort of Unity native buildouts. So these are specific gaming apps that are built here. And then it'll probably be, and I suspect those will be on the web often, and then probably on mobile. The reason I keep referencing a lot of these folks that we work with is because I think the scary thing when you're building infrastructure in a space like crypto is that it can be very easy to mistake sort of, the tool for the value. You can kind of get sucked in by shiny object syndrome. This is really cool technology. We get to build this Unity SDK. It's a lot of fun. And we have 100 different ideas of how it'll be used. And I think one of the ways in which we've kind of stayed grounded and stayed focused as a company has been to really build very closely with our customers and actually let them guide us. We for instance, launched something earlier this week, which is a guest mode. So guest mode allows you to spin up an embedded wallet without actually signing in. It's spun up on your device. It's a completely user self-custodied wallet that is on the user device, but they can basically have it when they first start a game. No need to sign in. They can start playing if that game requires transactions or anything else, with gas sponsorship and other ways. The developer can let the user sort of get a taste in that way. And if the user finds the game compelling enough and starts to need to take actions that they want associated beyond the initial device on which they started, they can always register and sort of transition over to an account. And that's, for example, a feature that we built because a lot of the gaming developers that we were working with were like, signing in to start is still too much friction. I want my users to be able to start playing, minute zero. And so again, that's, I think, why I keep talking so much about the builders we work with is we try to be really anchored to the types of problems that they're facing and trying to build compelling experiences for their users.
So as you're building kind of the front end for these consumer apps, right? You mentioned friend tech, right? PWA, distributed not through traditional app stores. And then you've got the emergence of a lot of mobile games that are coming to market that are, working with Privy, that will then see your tech become distributed through the App Store. I'm curious, and I'm not up to speed, so I don't know if you guys already have those that tech that is being distributed through the App Store today, but I'm curious, like, where do you think the sweet spot is for Privy? Do you think like the majority of the throughput will exist still through the traditional app stores, or do you see that changing with PWAs and whatever you want to call them over the next, let's say, year or so?
I'm of two minds on this. I think PWAs are an insane unlock because so far, the circa 2010s old school mentality for building consumer products was SOLO-MO, social, local, mobile. And I think crypto's basically been super behind the times in terms of actually adapting to where users are on the internet. And so in that sense, I think we've been playing with a major handicap. And I think PWAs have made it so much easier to sort of level the playing field and remind us all why people are spending, 60, 70, 80% of their time on mobile when experiencing non-work related products. At the same time, there are real drawbacks to building in PWAs, specifically around notifications that are a little bit broken. Frankly, I think the step of having to click your button up front and click at the homepage feels a little bit sus for anybody who's not working in crypto or hasn't jailbroken their phone. Likewise, I think in some places you can kind of tell, you can peek that it's actually a browser running under the hood. As soon as you start to introduce, for example, animations, you don't have access to the hardware in a way that you do in a native app. So my honest take is that I think PWAs have done so much good for the industry in allowing us to do much more rapid experimentation. And I'm hoping that coupled with a lot of the antitrust that's happening with Google and Apple and forcing them to rethink their app store policies, that means PWAs will be a really clean funnel for folks to then also invest in native apps. And the part where I get excited is when I look at products like Parallel, which is building a really, really interesting gaming ecosystem, and looking at other methods of distribution, be it physical cards. I'm excited to the time I start seeing a lot more games that end up having distributed networks in them on Steam and so on and so forth. But I suspect native app stores remain a really good distribution source for an audience that kind of knows what they want and aren't here for the crypto.
Do you think like the short-term gold standard is you're pushing different versions through different distribution channels, and then maybe the PWA channel is the one where you're going to run more A/B tests and then selectively maybe kind of uplift the App Store version? Just kind of curious because you work with so many different types of apps.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think, frankly, part of the limitation is also just team size, right? It takes a lot to maintain an app. It's a lot more intensive than, say, maintaining a PWA, which you can more or less do not for free, but close if you already have a React app and a web presence. A lot of what we're seeing teams do. So I think what you just said is less likely to some extent, in that I think you're kind of cannibalizing your own audience if you have a native app and a PWA side by side. Because then my question is, okay, which one am I using? They both appear as the same logo on my mobile device. Which one should I tap into? And I'm guessing it's going to become hard. So we haven't actually seen teams do both. We have seen teams go back and forth in either direction from native app to PWA or vice versa. I think a lot of what we're seeing as well is impact from React Native and Expo in the native app world rather than building in Swift or in Kotlin, because there are easier ways of pushing real-time updates. And I think as long as you don't touch certain parts of the app, like payments or like login methods, you don't actually need to do a full resubmission on the App Store. So that's a place where we're seeing a pretty steep learning curve amongst crypto developers, is in learning to understand the do's and don'ts of being App Store approved and maintaining that approval over time.
There's obviously a major point to be made on just reducing the friction, right? And allowing app developers to provide their users with like the best onboarding experience. One aspect of Web3 that I am personally quite a fan of is on-chain identity and the ability to take your wallet with you. I don't know if this is even something that, because I can imagine it being a bit tricky where app developers want to own their users, but I am curious how you think about it, so that it's not just like, I don't necessarily want to have 100 different wallets, unless maybe there's some way to aggregate across them.
For sure. It's a great question. To be honest, it's why we exist in this space. Ultimately, I think the thing that drew us to crypto is what superpowers does it actually unlock when building consumer-facing products? And the answer is two. One is self-custody, and the other is interoperability, and they're related. I think our premise was on two fronts. We have to start by solving the UX of self-custody. These products today are just too hard to use. That interoperability doesn't matter as much outside of financial, basically products. And so I think we focused on how do we build better in-app experiences where developers can really sort of have their craft shine and their brands come through. And again, we sit in this strange position, right? Because we're building a self-custodial product as a developer tool. So we're sort of at the intersection of the user experience and the developer experience. We have two masters that we have to serve in a way as an infrastructure provider. I think the next phase, and really today we have two core focuses as a company. One is better cross-app and interoperable experiences, exactly the thing that you said. And the second is better funding mechanisms, making it easier for folks who have no crypto assets to come in and transact in the first place. So I'll table the second one for now. But basically today, Privy spins up by default an in-app wallet for you. So it is app specific. The advantage here obviously is that UX can be incomparably good because the threat model, when it's not a shared wallet across apps and you're not subject to basically how likely a user is to get scammed by an evil app that they just connected to, makes it a lot easier to build really buttery UIs and UX for that app. And we think, again, interop starts to matter when you've got really compelling products that shine on their own accord and not just because they're crypto products. And so that's been our focus. We enable cross-app wallets today, meaning if you start, for example, with OpenSea, one of our customers, you spin up an embedded wallet there. You can always reuse that embedded wallet elsewhere, and it's made available into any other app that integrates the SDK and sort of adds a couple lines of code there. So we're continuing to work on making this cross-app experience easier, which is create a wallet in app A and use it anywhere else. That doesn't quite solve the fragmentation issue, though, that you bring up, Jackal, which is I don't want 100 different ones. And if I connect to 15, sure, I can use them elsewhere, but I've still got the 15. And so that's something that we're solving in two different ways. And this is ongoing work for us. But one is actually giving the user a choice. Do you want to make a new one here? Or do you want to actually reuse one of the existing ones that you've had elsewhere? And then the second one is actually giving them a super simple way to aggregate all of these and abstract away the fact that there are multiple so they can use balance from many of these apps and so on. And again, as you mentioned, it's a very careful consideration for us because I think, it's one thing to do this for the user. It's another to give the developer the freedom to build a really compelling product. And, my honest take is there's a reason why MetaMask looks the way it does. I think MetaMask is a very compelling product and we see ourselves as very complementary to it because these types of consumer wallets are kind of the logical endpoint of pushing user self-custody to its final conclusion, which is the wallet exists outside the app. It is entirely user controlled and it is a third-party surface that sits on top of your application. But obviously that creates major limitations, especially in gaming, if you're trying to build a really compelling product. And so finding the way to balance, I want a developer, for example, who wants certain rights, which they can't have, over a shared wallet that exists in multiple apps. And my user wants to be able, obviously, to use their assets absolutely anywhere is, I think, the really interesting set of product challenges that we're facing sort of at the deepest level working on Privy. But to give you an answer, I think there's a lot of this kind of feels, if you're deep in the crypto technical circles, the debate last year was MPC versus AA, which felt like a false narrative. And the answer was both. You can use both really well together. In fact, they're very complementary. And likewise, I think this question of embedded wallets versus smart wallets or any version of that feels very overblown to me. The reality is this is a developing technology. Both of them are, in fact. They, in my opinion, are kind of actually perfect complements. Embedded wallets provide a really, really great signer for account abstraction on-chain wallets, and actually continuing to push both along feels like the really important step. So I can say, I think, with a lot of confidence that by the end of this year, this fragmentation issue will have seemed like a spot in time along the way of actually enabling developers to build more compelling experiences in crypto. The other example I look at a lot is Apple system preferences. The fact is, for all of their woes in terms of building a closed-off ecosystem, they've built a way to balance developer control and user control. When you turn on Uber for the first time in your app, you see, do you want to share your location with this app? And you get to say, just this once, only when using the app, always. And somebody out there picked that those were the 3 defaults, and that one of the defaults wasn't, Tuesdays between 8 and 9 p.m. And so I think grounding these access control questions in product experience is really important, but doing it properly is like the major challenge, I think, of our industry, because without it, we get crypto such as it's been today, which is kind of like, Mad Max Fury Road, like desert, where there's some person out there looking to stab you at every corner. And that means, connecting your wallet to the wrong place, approving a transaction with hex that you don't understand, and getting drained. And then on the other side, the extreme is closed walled gardens that look a lot like Facebook, where the data is not yours and the exploitation of it is not to your benefit. And so understanding how we balance those two paths that we should seek to avoid is, I think, the majorly interesting thing about this tech that we're building in.
And that just about wraps it up for this episode. Henri, thanks a lot, man. This has been a great conversation. We should definitely do this more often, Alex, and get some big brain tech guys on. And we should do another episode with you, Henri, and then talk about some monetization stuff.
I would love to.
The content of this video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. The views shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may hold investments in some of the companies or digital assets featured in the video.